you speak about this kind of idea of public opinion and relating that to this GQ interview you did with Tony Blair. It's interesting how you spoke about this idea of going from loved to toxic so quickly, and in many of the parts of the world, even hated. And I'd like to ask how you dealt with maybe a similar situation from 2004 onwards, this idea of how public opinion can change so fast.
About what?
2004 onwards, how that public opinion changed and how you dealt with that situation.
But for Tony or for me?
For you, following on from, like your personal dealing with it.
See, I've got a pretty thick skin, to be honest. And I think that, it's quite strange at the moment because the podcast that I do is incredibly popular. I don't think I've ever been stopped as much as I do get stopped in the street at the moment with people saying nice things rather than not nice things. I think that a lot of the books that I've done, particularly the mental health stuff and also on films as well, I think has sort of maybe changed the way that people look at me. I still get, most interviews I do, I still get, or public meetings, still probably get a little bit of hostility about Iraq. But in the main, I mean, in the new book, I've got this, one of my lifetime ambitions is to get a word into the Oxford English Dictionary, okay? And the word I'm trying to get at the moment is perseverance, which is the combination of perseverance and resilience. And I think I've got both of those things. And I think the British public can be incredibly unreasonable at times, but they can also be very reasonable and fair. And I think they do have a certain respect for people who just keep going. So it was interesting the other night in Clacton. Lots of my friends were saying, why on earth are you doing that? Leave audience. They're just going to hate you. But actually, I don't think they did. And I think given especially the government didn't even put anybody on the panel, which was pathetic. So I think there was a bit of residual, well, at least he's got the balls to turn up and say what he really thinks. And so I think you just got to keep going. And I'll tell you what I think is important in this, and I think this is really important for your generation with the whole sort of social media stuff. I'm sometimes really shocked when I see people genuinely get affected by what people say about them on social media. I don't, unless there's a point to it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people can make a point and you think, yeah, they've got a point. And I think that's perfectly good. I think that's a good thing. Usually I'll know when they've got a point even before they've said it, but it's sometimes quite good to get it kind of registered. But most of the time, let's just take question time the other night. We recorded question time at 8:00, do it, get in the car, you're sitting in the back of the car for 2 hours being driven home. And you're just sort of flicking idly through the social media. And some of it's saying, I wish Alastair Campbell was back in charge. And others, oh my God, somebody actually saying what I think. And then you'll get the other one saying, you're a war criminal. Nobody gives a shit what you say. I have an image of that sort of stuff. It's a kid or it's a guy sitting in a vest in his underpants on his mum's sofa, watching the telly, and that's all he's got to do. Now, it could be.
I suppose you can understand why that could affect some people's mental health.
I do understand it, but the point I make to them. So my daughter's a comedian, right? She's a stand-up comedian. So stand-up comedians get a lot of abuse, particularly if they're women, right?
Yeah.
And every now and again, it's sort of, I think it gets to a bit. And I say to her, look, if I'd have thought that either of my parents thought I was a terrible son, that would really upset me. If my partner, who just phoned then, if my partner thought I was a terrible person to live with, that would really upset me. If my kids thought I was a horrible human being, if my colleagues thought I was a terrible team player or a terrible boss, if my close friends thought I'd let them down, that would get me down, right? But why would I worry about somebody that I've never met, who doesn't know me, who's got a prejudiced view that they want to vent? Just let them do it. Here's the thing for you. I've never, ever, ever blocked anybody on social media. Never. I just can't see the point. Can't see the point.
I think the only reason some people I know would block someone on social media would be because their girlfriend told them to.
I bet there are other reasons. But yeah, no, I think you give them something they want if you do that.
Moving on to, I guess, mental health. As you just stated earlier, you've been, very vocal, about mental health, and your own struggles with it. I guess, how hard is it to work within politics, as it relates to, I guess, consistent demands or placed upon you by government, not in your case, by constituents, by etc. How does that relate to mental health?
I think I'm actually speaking about this with a Tory MP, Charles Walker, who's also talked about mental health struggles. We're doing an event together in Parliament week after next, I think. There is something strange about politics. I do think sometimes it's almost like a laboratory for poor mental health. It can be quite isolating. It is hard to do well, is hard. I think to the sort of level that I was operating with alongside a leader of a party and a prime minister, to do it the way I felt it had to be done, don't even think about having days off, really. Now that was probably to be fair, I was like that when I was a journalist as well. So not everybody maybe has to be like that, but you feel the pressure all the time for sure. And then particularly now we talked about social media, the abuse that people get, the expectations are massive. Why can't they sort it out? Well, it's quite difficult. Yeah, but they're in power. The expectations are very, very high. And I think the other thing is, I don't think politics itself, I don't think politicians do a good job of defending politics, because most of the time they're just taking lumps out the other side. So the message being put out to the public is, God, it's not a very nice life, this, is it? And what that does is it stops people who probably would be quite good at it from even thinking about giving it a go. I really worry about the narrowness of the gene pool, or the lack of depth in the gene pool of people who want to go into politics now. I meet a lot of really clever people. I think, why have you never thought about politics? Oh, no way. So I think the impact on mental health is, I think it's real. And I think it's exacerbated by the fact that for all sorts of reasons, people in politics don't particularly want to admit that they have mental health challenges. Very, very few have. There was a debate a few years ago, and four people in Parliament spoke up about having had, I think one was depression, Charles Walker was OCD, there's a woman who talked about postnatal depression. But, very, very few, even since then, very few have. Now, I'm not saying, I don't think we should all be obliged to say, oh, I'm having a good day, a bad day, or I get a depression or I get anxiety. I'm not saying that. But I do think if there was more openness, there'd be more understanding. And actually, I've found for myself, I've had a lot of, let's be honest, a lot of Tories absolutely despise me. I'm very proud of that. And a lot of the media likewise. But when it comes to mental health, I felt nothing but support from most people. To be frank, including parts of the media, that even the papers like the Mail have never really gone for me after that, have gone after me on that. So I think if we could all be more open, we'd all be better off.